Good evening, and I'd like to call to order the April 6th, 2022 regular council meeting. And at this time, I would like to do the traditional land acknowledgement for our first meeting in April. As a council and working with our administration team, we have decided to do a land acknowledgement on the first meeting of every month. We honor all the many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit whose footsteps have marked these lands for centuries. We acknowledge that the ancestral and traditional lands on which we gather are land of the Blackfoot Confederacy and Treaty 7 territory, a traditional meeting ground for many Indigenous peoples, and in particular, our neighbors, Siksika Nation, on whose traditional territory we work, live, and play, and on whose traditional territory we stand and where Strathmore resides. At this time, I'd like to confirm the agenda for tonight's meeting. Are there any emergent items from any of our councillors tonight? Anything from administration?
Your Worship.
Councillor Peterson?
Your Worship, Councillor Wagner and I are asking the permission of council to go into in camera after our meeting today under 24(1)A. That's personnel, right? Personnel.
Yes, and just for clarification, is this something that this would be something we would vote on? Kara or Kevin?
To the agenda.
The amendment to the agenda?
Your Worship, I would move confirmation of the agenda as amended.
Thank you. We have a motion to amend the agenda, and is there discussion on that amendment? Seeing none, all in favor? And now we need a motion to confirm the amended agenda.
I move the agenda as amended.
Oh, thank you. You mean you did? Okay, thank you. Sorry about that. We have no public hearing tonight. Public comments. We have no registered people in the community or in public who expressed an interest in making comments tonight. And so I'll turn to the gallery and the people who are in the audience tonight. Are there any members of the public who are present and who wish to comment on an item on the agenda for tonight? Okay, thank you. That brings us to item 5, delegations. 5.1, delegation, Wheatland and Area Hospice Society. And we have Joni McNeely here with us tonight. Sorry, Dr. Joni McNeely, I know you've retired from your practice? Yes.
Yes, I have.
Okay, thank you and welcome. Just before you get started, I just wanted to take a moment to thank you and all the people who have worked so hard to get the Hospice Society going. And it's just been an exciting progression to watch because you've gone from a fledgling society that has been very successful fundraising over the last several years. COVID came along and disrupted a lot of different people in a lot of different situations and events. But the growth in your organization has been amazing, and we just think that, I just think that this is going to be an amazing thing for our community. And to see you also now be partnered and part of Wheatland Housing Management Board to hopefully, if everything goes well, move closer and closer to getting a new seniors lodge with an attached hospice. So congratulations to you and all the members of your society.
Thank you very much, Mayor Fuel. I appreciate those comments. Thank you to the council for allowing me to update you. With time being short, I'd just like to review the 3 pillars of our society and discuss our society's strategy moving forward, as well as comment on Wheatland and Area Housing Society's moves to fit into the bigger picture of hospice palliative care in the province. Many of us likely have known someone who died, and with the exception of sudden death or an accident, we all are expected to die in a known manner. And Wheatland and Area Housing, our Hospice Society is unique in that really we're one of the few organizations in our community where 100% of us belong into that group. So what is palliative care? I'll just quickly define that. Is if we look this way, there's health and aging and disease, and at some point in our lives, we're going to be standing at this spot, and we're going to be looking that way, where there's a defined limit of time left on this earth, and we would all like to imagine that path with family and friends in a kind and caring place. But most importantly as well, we need to ask, where will that place be? And that's where the Hospice Society fits in. The purpose really is to look at those last months, days, hours, and help make them just a little bit easier. As well, allow people, whether it's a dying patient, their family, or friends or community. Oops, I just did something. Is that, there we go. To be a little bit better informed, and as well to help family, friends, and the dying patient be supported in any issues that can arise. Why? Why are we doing this? Well, I'll tell you, because if you knew what we know and what the Alberta government knows, is that really 5% of palliative care takes place within the medical community with medical personnel, and 95% of it takes place in the community with family and friends. And that dying patient is either alone or with those family and friends or with people in the community, and we need to make that better. We need to say what is going on. It's not the best at the moment, and let's try and improve it. Okay, so these are our 3 pillars of our society. Financial responsibility is also a pillar, but that's not very sexy, so I don't put that up there. So every action and direction and strategy that the board does supports these directives. Obviously, under people, families and patients are our #1 priority, and similarly, volunteers and the community donors are a priority with us. What's new is that normally that 3 to 6 month time period here is becoming longer, and in fact, palliative care is now being defined as here at this point when the diagnosis is being made. What is also new is there's lots of movement and lots of effort into doing it yourself within the community, as I mentioned, and for as little cost as possible, which I'll talk about in a few minutes. With regards to the health system, they're looking at the culture of caring for our sick and dying that years and years ago was very, very common. We all took care of our own prior to hospitals and prior to dying moving into hospitals. They're realizing now that that culture is being lost. They're realizing now there's going to be a dependency on volunteers here, and they're realizing that they need to train these volunteers and support them with a lot of education. With regards to our community donors, in 5 short years, we've raised $2.1 million, and that comes from big and small endowments to in memoriam donations. There's unique fundraisers like Farming for Hospice. There's participation in national fundraisers like Hike for Hospice. And our board is very, very huge with gratitude and recognition of this unique aspect of Wheatland County and the municipal towns with regards to the donations. People here give from their heart when it really counts, and we're very proud of them for doing that. Just for a lack of time, I'm not going to go too much into programs other than we have 4 programs. There's a Palliative Navigator, Bedside Respite program, No One Dies Alone program, and Dying to Learn, and you can see those on our website. The motivation behind those 4 is to try and shift community practice around death and dying and increase the capacity of formal and informal supports around care and loss and grief and bereavement, and to encourage inclusion in social networks. And that's one of the reasons I'm talking to you now, is those social networks. All these programs are run completely by volunteers who are extremely capable and committed and qualified. And once again, our board is very, very happy to have that, and it's unique in the towns around the Calgary area. Our third pillar is places, and in actual fact, people really focus on the hospice building, but in actual fact, we are providing hospice palliative care now. It's in the homes, it's in the hospital, the volunteers go into the hospital, it's in both seniors facility in the lodge and in Sagewood. And really what we're providing now is a hospice without walls. We're meeting the physical and the emotional, the spiritual, the psychological requirements of this death and dying. And a reminder to you that 80% of people want to be in their home. So really, this hospice building is actually meeting the need of 20%, but it's the 80% that we're already supporting right now. But recognize that sometimes with regards to that 20%, it might be there's caregiver burnout or there's not caregivers available. Sometimes the physical home isn't amenable to having someone pass away there. And of course, that's when the wheels fall off the bus, and that's where the need of the hospice can fill. As well, a hospice facility can act as a hub for those volunteers, for the programs, for the community to be reaching in and displaying their compassion and commitment and their caring ideals. And a hospice is much, much different than the palliative care room up at the hospital. It's not just about the beds. It's about a day hospice for people to come and have a little bit of enjoyment in their life. It's about rooms like that and offices that can support psychologists and spiritual workers and social workers. It's about a social gathering place, whether it's the kitchen table or the living room areas that family and friends can gather around and not only support the dying patient, but also support themselves in the death. And what we do know is that with hospice, patients do better and families do better, and it's ultimately more financially responsible. So all of this work is really done on all of our work is really done on the coattails of Alan Keelahar from the University of Vermont and Martin Labrie from the University of Calgary. They're the gurus of community, of compassionate community. And what they want is not only with hospice, which is sort of the low-hanging fruit, but for all programs, whether it's mental health, addictions, homelessness, elder care, child care, counselor care, anything that the community can reach into. They are saying that the people can be taught this lost capacity to care and come to believe that they have a role in taking care of others. So within the communities and within Alberta Health Services, there's a recognition of not only age in place, you've all heard of that, but now it's a dying in place. And it's not a shift of if this is going to happen, I'm letting you know that this is when this will happen. And I know I'm preaching to the choir here about community because rural communities have so much more buy-in for belonging than urban centers. But just a reminder that, this is 95% of our work that we're doing, and really 5% is the medical business. So let's not focus on that, okay? What role can you do? What can you do? What alliances and partnerships can you form? I think you guys are all on the right track. Thank you very much. What policies and structures can you create? Once again, I think you guys are doing a great job. And we are recognized, the Wheatland and Area Hospice Society is recognized as within the province of Alberta as being the little society that can. We are an engine, the little engine that can, and we're recognized as being innovative, and I'm very proud of the work that we've done and that the community has done. So we can all agree that palliative care is coming to a town near us. What Alberta, the government of Alberta is asking, how do we get there? And so are we, the Hospice Society, and what are our points of gain and what are our points of pain? And how do we optimize palliative care in our little neck of the woods? And we're always going back to those three pillars: the people, the places, and the programs. And what can we create? How can we engage people? How can we support people? The provincial medical planners, up to this point, they've put money into here for palliative care, but they will be putting more money into specific curriculum changes. If you can imagine, there hasn't been a whole lot of curriculum about palliative care. It's learning on the fly. So whether it's doctors, nurses, HCAs, LPNs, they will be getting some more education about palliative care, community care. And as well, there will be a recognition of the volunteers, so there will be more education and programming geared towards them. There was $20 million, released from the provincial government for palliative care. 9 million of that has already been earmarked last year. $11 million is coming down the pipes. And at some point in time, there will be some announcements from the ministry about that. So in conclusion, I'm not asking for anything, I'm not asking for much. Just some recognition that palliative care is community care. Recognition that, like it or leave it, Alberta is moving dying and death out of the acute care hospitals to our homes and seniors lodges and supported living facilities, and we need to look at that. I'm also asking for some recognition of the incredible generosity and work done by the donors and the volunteers, not only the volunteers at our fundraisers, but also our volunteers on our boards and committees, and especially those volunteers that are at the bedside, answering questions, supporting families, supporting patients, doing the grunt work, doing the heavy lifting, and holding the hands. So, and I want to recognize you, because there is going to be some incredible work that needs to be done by the community, and you being the leaders will have to take the lead on that and help facilitate that, because this is going to be a fundamental shift in our thinking around death and dying and in healthcare. And last point is that death and dying is one of the many phases of life. And just like any phase of life and lots of healthcare, it needs to be planned for. So thank you. Reminder about Hike for Hospice. And special shout out to Scott Garnett, because he's been helping me with Hike for Hospice. So thank you. Any questions? This was kind of fast, and I
Thank you. Just maybe if there's audience at home watching, can you just remind them what the date is for the Hike for Hospice?
Sure. So the Hike for Hospice is at Kinsman Park on May 1st at noon. Starts with an opening ceremonies. Registrations start an hour prior at 11 o'clock. People can go to our website to register for the hike, to collect donations, or if they're unable to make the hike or they're just willing to, they can just straight make a donation on that site. So thank you, and I appreciate that.
Thank you very much. Councillor Peterson.
Thank you very much, Dr. McNeely. I appreciate all the work of your team, and I always think that, it's really easy to do a, sort of a one-stint volunteer, but to dedicate your life to it is a different kind of deal. So thank you so much. I know that about 6 or 7 years ago, people in community undertook to speak about per capita funding ongoing for the hospice, and every single community in the county of Wheatland, every council in every community within the council, within the Wheatland County borders voted to support, in principle, per capita funding for the hospice going forward. And I believe that it ties in so closely to the understanding in this community that 25% of our community is over 65, and that within the next very short period of time, less than half a decade, that number will hit 32% and will increase up until 2046. So that's significant, and so it fits in with our age-friendly community context. And I love the idea that you talk about that hospice exists throughout community. It's not just a single space, that it exists everywhere. And I hear about all the time about the work that you're doing. So my question is, when will it be time for the leaders in our respective communities to talk about per capita funding for hospice and end-of-life care in terms of what you're doing now? So, you know, I hearing you talk and knowing and following you on your website with what you're doing, I see capacity to put a firm foundation under what's existing. And so, you know, we know that the cost will eventually be somewhere in that $30 to $38 per capita to be able to operationalize a hospice for a long, long time. And, you know, less than it costs us to run our ambulance, you know, in the original days. So that can-do attitude that you talked about, alive and well. But I'm wondering if there is a transition from that. You know, is it time to think about per capita funding in a smaller amount to start to build toward that build that you and I both know is going to happen in the very near future? Is it time for leaders in our respective governmental communities to start talking about that?
Thank you. That's a good question. From my point of view, I am laying the groundwork with regards to the idea of compassionate community. I'm laying the groundwork with the actual hands-on deck, heavy lifting of the volunteers. So is it time from my point of view? Yes. Is it time from your point of view? You will need to answer that. But from the Government of Alberta's point of view, like I said before, Wheatland and Area Hospice Society is recognized as being innovative. What you're proposing is a new model of funding, and they will certainly look at that and its as a pilot project and its transferability into other areas. Because at the moment, Alberta Health Services really only guarantees 50% of the operating funding. So that leaves a huge burden of fundraising on a small community that is already doing all the other stuff. So you could certainly help by providing some leadership in that to move forward on it. And when is the time ready? Any time is fine.
And so, you know, I wonder about, you know, how you even, I know you fundraise, and I know you fundraise for capitalization of project, but it must be a terrible burden to try to fundraise when you're offering palliative care and end-of-life care to people in our outlying communities. Like I see it happen in this community, but when you start adding the time and the mileage and gas money, you know, all of those kinds of things, it must be burdensome.
Yes, yes. And that's not what we should be doing, right? We shouldn't be looking at the dollars.
I know.
It's not about dollars. It's about care and compassion and providing a good journey from this point to that point. Yeah. And it shouldn't be about the money.
I think that your ability to communicate the reality of that has been extraordinarily helpful, and I want to thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Peterson. Any other questions or comments for Dr. McNeely? Deputy Mayor Montgomery.
Thank you. So this is just about like when the lodge is built and if there's a hospice area in the lodge. Would you anticipate that like people that live in the lodge would be kind of transferred into the hospice area for their final days, or would they stay in where they live normally?
That's a good question, because I mentioned age in place and dying in place. So within the lodge, the rooms where a person is currently living is their home. So it would be expected and hoped that they would be able to die in their own home, in their own room. If they asked, if they wanted to, if they were part of that 20%, then yes, absolutely, they could move into one of those rooms. We're hoping for a 3 to 6 bed hospice, start with 3, expand into 6 as the population of this area grows. And the same would be for people in any of the areas, you know, living out of town, living in a seniors lodge, living in Sagewood. If there was a request, they could move into the hospice. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. I was just wondering about, because, you know, it's obviously an opportunity for you guys to co-locate. And so I was just wondering if like that was factored into it, people, you know, using it. So thank you.
Yeah.
And I think that's a definite example of how important that new lodge and hospice could be in this community, and the location that the past council has provided for that facility could be incredible, being right here in the park, and for family and friends to visit when people are in their senior years, as well as unfortunately, when they go into their declining time, they still have access to a really nice park, and I think that could be wonderful for them.
Yes.
Councillor Peterson.
I just one thing that hasn't been spoken about tonight, but I remember when we were first hearing about hospice care and end-of-life care, that your community, your hospice community, made the point that it's not just old people who die, and that hospice care has a very important role to play across the life of communities, people. And I think that's a really critical, as someone who, you know, who's had family members, you know, pass at a young age. I can't think of how incredibly important that is. So.
Yes.
Thank you, Councillor Peterson. Again, Dr. McNeely, thank you for coming tonight for your presentation. And thank you for all your work and efforts in this hospice group. We really appreciate all that you've done.
Thank you very much for having me speak.
And that brings us to item 6. There is no consent agenda. We move on to 7.1, confirming the regular council meeting minutes for March 16th, 2022. Page 9 of your agenda. Councillor Langmaid.
I would like to move that council adopt the March 16th, 2022 regular council meeting minutes as presented.
Thank you. You've all heard the motion. All in favor? And the motion is carried. That brings us now to 7.2, special council meeting minutes for March 19th, 2022 on page 18. Councillor Langmaid.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. I would like to move that council adopt the March 19th, 2022 special council meeting minutes as presented.
And I'll call the question. All in favor? That motion is carried, which brings us to the last one, 7.3, special council meeting minutes for March 20th, 2022 on page 21. Councillor Langmaid.
Let's make it a hat trick. I'd like to move that council adopt the March 20th, 2022 special council meeting minutes as presented.
Thank you very much. All in favor? And that motion is carried, which brings us to 8, business for tonight. 8.1, the Happy Cat Sanctuary Memorandum of Funding Agreement on page 24. And Claudette, you are speaking tonight. Claudette, would you mind just saying how I'm supposed to pronounce your last name?
Last name's pronounced Thorhog.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening, sorry. Good evening and welcome tonight.
Good evening, Your Worship and fellow councillors. I'm here today to speak on the MOA between Happy Cat and the town of Strathmore. I'm here to take any questions, and Barb and Michelle are also here from Happy Cat if you have any questions.
Thank you. Are there questions from councillors tonight? Councillor Peterson?
Your Worship, I would move the council approve the memorandum of funding agreement with Happy Cat Sanctuary as presented in attachment 1.
Thank you for that motion. And now that we have a motion on the floor, there can be discussion. Is there discussion on that motion? Deputy Mayor Montgomery?
So I've kind of gone over the information that's been provided, and I've asked for kind of follow-up information which has been provided. So I guess like, so I've seen this, you know, in my first couple of years on council, I've seen this start out with, you know, a smaller ask from council, and then that ask increased and increased, and it's increased again. And due to the fact that the town apparently due to the fact that the town has a cat control bylaw, the town is obligated to spend some resources to manage stray cats or lost or loose cats. And I asked, one of the things I asked about was, you know, why does the town deal with, why would the town contribute money towards cats, for instance, but not skunks? You know, I have heard that, you know, people have a hard time dealing with the skunk issue in town at times. I personally have seen a dozen skunks kind of in one of my backyards. And so to me, that's kind of a greater concern than the cat issue. And again, so I've been kind of informed that it has to do with the fact that the town has a cat bylaw, that this is part of a discussion even. And I'm concerned about the fact that this is an increasing cost for the town. And meanwhile, we have ever dwindling funds, I guess you could say, free funds. And so I have concerns about just, you know, whether this money should be directed this way, or how much of this money should be directed this way. I agree that there is value, there's certainly value provided to the town in the help of the cat management problem that results from us having a bylaw that says that the town will deal with cats. I also have concerns about the fact that the Happy Cat Society is, and last meeting I used the term importing cats, and I was told that was kind of the wrong way of putting it, and I'll accept that. My point was that there are cats from outside the town being brought in, so whether there's a net import of cats or not, I'm not sure, but my concern is that there's town money that is being put towards a problem that is essentially from out of town. And again, I was told that, you know, it's not town money that's being used for the out-of-town cats, but I think it's fair to say that if there was not cats being brought in from out of town, then the scale of the Happy Cat would probably not need to be what it is. It wouldn't need as many volunteers, as many volunteer hours. It wouldn't need possibly a retail space to be rented if there was not hundreds of extra cats being brought in from out of town. And so I recognize that, you know, on maybe a dollar figure, or when you look at how each individual dollar is spent, perhaps the town's money is not going towards out-of-town cats specifically, but it's going towards out-of-town cats because of the scale that is created. And so I have concerns about that. And, you know, where does it kind of end, I guess? You'd think this is an easy decision, actually. Yeah, I think for me it comes down to those things. It comes down to do we have the free money to spend? Do we have you know, I voted in the past to contribute money towards the Happy Cat, smaller amounts. Last year I asked council to fund a smaller amount, and that was approved. And I guess, like, so the point has also been raised about, you know, asking, say, the County of Wheatland to contribute money because a number of cats, possibly in the hundreds, come from, you know, Wheatland County and other places, Calgary, Rocky View County, and the cat issue in town is an issue because we're an urban or semi-urban community. Cats are not an issue in a rural community or in a farm community. So the idea that, you know, it's not realistic to expect a rural farm community to contribute to something that is essentially a Strathmore problem. And so I look at the, you know, like, so it's like, yeah, so, you know, why is the town contributing money towards a problem that is being brought in from out of town to some extent? That gives me concern. So at this point, like, I'm having trouble saying that I can support a motion to spend $50,000 a year on. I guess my point is that I think there's possibly better ways to spend the $50,000. Maybe even towards, you know, dealing with the cat issue, if that's what the residents of Strathmore would like to see. But my issue, I think, has to do with the model, I guess you could say, that the Happy Cat operates under currently. But I'm open to, I guess, hearing other people's perspectives. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Councillor Langmaid?
Thank you very much, Your Worship. And I want to say, as a previous volunteer for Happy Cat, I feel I appreciate that the work that they're doing in the community, not only from the aspect of saving cats and taking them off of the streets and making sure that they're fed, find homes and all of that, but the community spirit that they foster in Strathmore. And the number of people that come together to volunteer at that facility, I feel like we're getting actually much more than just cat control. We're getting a facility, you know, through partnership that really encourages young people, old people, everyone from the community to come out and volunteer who you know, who care for cats. I also know that there are other municipalities in Alberta, specifically Airdrie and Medicine Hat, that competitively bid this work. And I know that Airdrie actually pays $360,000 to the organization that, now granted they do dogs as well, but is a significantly much larger bill. And just in return of the comment of a net import of cats, I think it's also important to recognize that I think an argument could be made that towns are a net exporter of cats, given the number of stories that we hear of kittens being dropped off on a farm. Oh, we took the cat to a farm and now a farmer has this cat that may or may not be well around their own animals. And it may or may not be welcome on their land. So, and if we end up in Strathmore with an increase in the cat population, what we will see is people taking cats out to the country. We'll see an increase in that behavior. So, I am fully in support of this. I think we would struggle to get the same amount of service for the same price any other way. And on top of that, the community that's built through this organization in our town is a value that I can't place a number on. So those are my comments in regards to this, and I'm very strongly in support of this MOU, and thank you very much for the work that you do in our community. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Councillor Langmaid. I think for me, it becomes a matter of one way or another, Strathmore is going to have to pay for the cat situation that develops, and we don't really know the cost of how it would be for our enforcement officers to have to manage that situation, the time spent. I know when I first got on council in 2010, one of the past heads of enforcement did a lot of work with impounded cats and dogs, and that took a great deal of staff time. For myself, it's just a matter of we pay one way or we pay the other. I don't know which is cheaper, but I know I would much rather have our enforcement officers in town doing their jobs as opposed to having to drive to the city and transporting some cats who need to be looked after in another place. So I'm in support of this. I know there will be people in the coffee shop tomorrow being really upset with how much we might sponsor the Happy Cat Sanctuary. But people have to realize there's a cost to this situation, and one way or another we pay as a community. And there was a feral cat problem at one time in Strathmore. That's been controlled by the Happy Cat Society. And to have our enforcement officers' time and efforts better utilized, not having to deal with that, carries a great deal of importance to me. And I think it's really, even if you look at it just from a morale point of view for our officers, not to be having to deal with feral cats and that kind of a thing. I would much rather have them be able to stay in town, focusing on the important matters in our town situation. So I will be in support of this. And just so the public knows at home, I need to leave in about 7 minutes. I'm doing a speech at the Strathmore Performing Arts Festival. So if we are done our discussion and everything, and there's a motion on the floor, I'll be able to vote on that. But I do have to leave in about 7 minutes.
I was just going to call the question, Your Worship.
Okay, are there any other comments? Deputy Mayor Montgomery?
Thank you. I think some reasonable points have been made. For me, it comes down to what is the most cost-effective path. And that's what sold me. That's what sold me a couple years ago or a few years ago when I voted for this. We were told at the time, and that was, I believe, it was $33,000 around there that we were contributing at the time. And we were told at the time that, yeah, the town would have to spend. Yeah.
Sorry, I think Councillor Peterson is saying she's called the question, so.
I'm under the, but I'm under the impression that doesn't actually mean anything.
Oh, okay. Well, Kara, I'm looking to lead services. If someone calls the question, I don't believe that came up in our Robert's Rules of Order session.
So when somebody calls the question, that's the end of debate.
Okay, so.
I'm sorry.
You can finish your,
Yeah.
If you can make it brief.
Yeah, so for me, it just comes down to cost effectiveness. I was told that, $33,000 was a good deal at the time, and that's what sold me. We would have to spend more at the time. I have a hard time with 50,000, and so for that reason, I'm unable to support it. Thank you very much, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Peterson. I understand you've called the question. Kara, and maybe we can get clarification. I think, Chris, do you have any for us before I call the question?
Yeah, so in section 2.8 of the procedural bylaw, it does say that the mayor is the only one who can call the question and end debate.
Okay, thank you. So you've gotten your statement across. I think we know what you're feeling and where you're headed, and I'll just ask if anyone has any other discussion points, comments, and I will call the question. All in favor of the motion put forward? And opposed? And the motion is carried. Thank you, Claudette. Thank you, Happy Cat people, for what you do. Much appreciated. And good luck in the future. And perhaps, as a way going forward, maybe you can consider some of the things that were mentioned as far as the rural cats, if there's a way to, we'll leave it in your hands. Maybe there's a way to manage that situation. Pardon me?
Or as government to government, maybe that's something
Yes,
we should manage.
you could check with the other municipal government, see? All right, thank you very much for everything you've done. And thank you, Claudette.
Thank you.
So we move on to, I think we'll have to go. So I'm going to ask Deputy Mayor Montgomery if I can turn the chair duties over to you. And do you want the gavel? Not everybody can lift it. It's kind of like Thor's hammer. I definitely. Okay. Just wasn't sure. Yeah, I will be back as soon as I'm done. I might do a song there, actually. So I will return as quickly as I can, Deputy Mayor. I leave it in your good hands. Thank you.
All right, I guess we'll move to 8.2, and that's the Strathmore Stampede sponsorship request.
Good evening, Deputy Mayor and Council. So the Strathmore and District Agricultural Society has requested to renew the Stampede sponsorship agreement between the town and the society, and they've requested a 3-year funding agreement at the same funding level as previous years of $25,750. In 2020, Council made a resolution to approve a 2-year funding agreement with a chance for a renewal in the 3rd year. And administration's recommending that Council approve a 3-year commitment for that same amount, just to provide some stability in terms of budgeting, and then that price is also locked in for those 3 years. In addition to that, Council's budgeted $21,750 to this, so that means that the unbudgeted amount of $4,000 will need to be approved, and those funds would come from the communication and marketing operating budget. So yes, the recommendation is to approve a 3-year agreement, but Council can choose to do a 1 or a 2-year as well.
Great, thank you. Any questions, Council? Does anybody want to make a motion?
I would move that council authorize the CAO to sign the letter of agreement between the town of Strathmore and the Strathmore and District Agricultural Society in the amount of $25,750 for a 3-year term, and that the unbudgeted balance of $4,000 for the 2022 Strathmore Stampede be paid through the town's 2022 communications and marketing operating budget.
Thank you very much. Is there any questions or comments about that motion? Seeing none, all in favor? Thanks. All right, and we'll move on to 8.3, which is a proclamation for the National Volunteer Appreciation Week.
And so I'll cover that one as well.
Yeah, go ahead, please, yeah.
Yep. So administration's recommending that Council proclaim April 24th through 30th as National Volunteer Appreciation Week. That's an important part of our town's recognition of the many volunteers that we have. Our community benefits from over 70,000 hours of volunteering every year, and the FCSS is proud to host the National Volunteer Week recognition. This year's theme is Volunteering is Empathy in Action, which affirms a strong connection between volunteerism and empathy. And by proclaiming the week as National Volunteer Week in Strathmore, our community joins with others across the country in celebrating volunteers.
Great, thank you. I've always wanted to proclaim something, so I'm going to read this. Whereas the town of Strathmore recognizes the importance of National Volunteer Week. Sorry, does this need a motion as well? Oh, okay, okay. And encourages an environment in which volunteers can flourish, and whereas the town of Strathmore could not function without volunteers who serve on boards, commissions, task forces, and committees, and whereas each day volunteers help shape the policies that keep our community moving forward in the right direction, and their impact can be felt throughout the community, and whereas there are numerous volunteers in our community who give their time and effort to help others through their church, community organizations, service clubs, schools, hospitals, charitable organizations, and other worthy endeavors, and whereas volunteers are motivated by the simple satisfaction of helping their fellow citizens and making their community a better place to live. Melissa, would you like to make the motion?
Deputy Mayor, I'd be glad to. I would like to move that Council proclaim April 24th to 30th, 2022 as National Volunteer Appreciation Week in the town of Strathmore.
Thank you. All in favor of that motion? Thanks. Now, therefore, I, Pat Fuel, Mayor of Strathmore, do hereby proclaim, wait, that's not right. All right, it's National Volunteer Week, everyone. Okay, sorry, thanks. Okay, we'll do the proclamation for National Public Works as well, so go ahead.
Yeah, so administration's requesting that council proclaim May 15th through May 21st as National Public Works Week. It's important to recognize the work that's done by our operations team, and a number of events are being held during the week of May 15th through 21st to educate the public and other staff about the work being done by the operations staff in the community.
And you know what, actually, like I wasn't going to do this, but since it's our public works, I think that they certainly deserve it. So whereas public works professionals focus on infrastructure, facilities, and services that are of vital importance to sustainable and resilient communities and to the public health, high quality of life, and well-being of the people of Strathmore. And whereas these infrastructure, facilities, and services could not be provided without the dedicated efforts of public works professionals who are engineers, managers, and employees at all levels of government and the private sector, who are responsible for rebuilding, improving, and protecting our nation's transportation, water supply, water treatment, and solid waste systems, public buildings, and other structures and facilities essential for our citizens. And whereas it is in the public interest for the citizens, civic leaders, and children in Strathmore to gain knowledge of and to maintain an ongoing interest and understanding of the importance of public works and public works programs in their respective communities. And whereas the year 2022 marks the 62nd annual National Public Works Week, sponsored by the American Public Works Association. Melissa.
Deputy Mayor, I'd like to move that Council proclaim May 15th to 21st, 2022 as National Public Works Week in the town of Strathmore.
Thank you. All in favor of that motion? Thank you. And so it's declared National Public Works Week as well. Thank you. All right, and Ethan on municipal right-of-way works and excavation policy.
Thank you. Good evening, Deputy Mayor and Council. Bring tonight Policy 6104, which is the Municipal Right-of-Way Works and Excavation Policy, which was last reviewed in 2018. This policy has been reformatted to match our current template, and some additions have been made. These include the need for a temporary road closure application to be submitted along with the municipal right-of-way application, an adjustment on when securities are required, and as well the addition of pavement degradation. These changes have been made to streamline the process as much as possible while ensuring that the town's own infrastructure is properly protected. Should council have any specific questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Okay, thank you. Is there any questions for Ethan?
Just move. Unless you have questions, I can move the motion.
I just have one question, and this just has to do with the road degradation fee. Or sorry, that's what the whole topic's about. But is this something that we track now, as far as like, so we can like apply crack seal and stuff like that? Like do we track road degradation at this point?
So Deputy Mayor, currently we don't track it. Within the next item I have in the agenda is the bylaw, is a bit of a calculation on what I believe we spend. Yeah. I did have to use provincial numbers from Alberta Transportation rather than local numbers because we don't track that specifically. I could determine how much we've purchased in a year and how many hours we've spent in a year, but what that correlates on a per meter, I can't give you that number.
Okay. All right, Councillor Peterson, if you'd like to make a motion, that'd be great.
Thank you. I would move that council adopt the amended policy 6104, municipal right-of-way works and excavation policy as presented in attachment 1. And I'd just like to say that the updates that I see in this policy go the distance in terms of providing protection to the town, and I really, really appreciated what I saw in terms of the fullness of developing it out from what it was in 2018. I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was very good, actually. Anybody else? Okay, all in favor of that? Great, thank you. And so we'll move on to 9.1, fees amending bylaw number 22-16. Ethan, if you want to go ahead.
All right, thank you. So following the adoption of policy 6104, an update to our fees bylaw is required so that we can collect this pavement degradation fee. The other two fees that are noted have not changed from previous. So just for the clarification, pavement degradation is the loss in quality and lifespan of an asphalt surface due to interruptions in the pavement's engineered structure. There are many municipalities now that charge a pavement degradation fee to recoup these additional costs. Utilizing historical costs over the past couple of years, I was able to determine that an appropriate fee would be $18.44 per linear meter. We did choose the linear meter rate in comparison to a meter squared rate just for efficiency purposes. Linear meter we can do generally off of drawings or planning documents rather than having to go to site and take measurements. We did, however, put in a meter squared rate for larger excavations just to ensure that we are protecting ourselves when necessary. So that rate is $12.29 per meter squared. So we are hoping to receive all 3 readings tonight, but should there be any questions, happy to answer those. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Is there any questions? Okay, go ahead.
I would move that council give first reading to bylaw number 22-16, being a bylaw to amend the fees bylaw number 21-30.
Thank you. All in favor of that? Great. Go ahead.
Deputy Mayor, I'll move that council give second reading to bylaw number 22-16, being a bylaw to amend the fees bylaw number 21-30.
Thank you. I just have, I guess, one question. So am I understanding this correctly, that the fee is prorated based on the age of the road, or no?
Deputy Mayor, no. There are some municipalities that do that.
Okay.
Because of the size of Strathmore, the road network that we have, and also the fact that our 2 major roads aren't a responsibility of the municipality, it made more sense to just determine a simple rate. Doesn't matter the road classification or size. Some municipalities will do it based on the age of the road. Some municipalities will do it based on the classification of the road. We've chosen, at least at this time, the more simpler road.
I see. Thank you. Is there any other questions or comments about that motion? Okay. All in favor? Thank you. Third reading, please. Or unanimous committee.
I move that council give unanimous consent to a third and final reading of bylaw number 22-16, being a bylaw to amend the fees of bylaw number 21-30.
Thank you very much. All in favor of that motion? Great. And third and final reading?
I would move that council give third and final reading to bylaw number 22-16, being a bylaw to amend the fees bylaw number 21-30.
Thank you very much. All in favor of that? Thank you. Thanks a lot, Ethan. All right, and we'll move on to 9.2, Legacy Farm Area Structure Plan Bylaw number 21-21.
Good evening, Deputy Mayor and Council. I'm Megan Williams, Planner 3 for the Town of Strathmore, here to present third reading of the Legacy Farm Area Structure Plan. The Legacy Farm Area Structure Plan, just a brief summary, controls the development of 48 hectares of land within the southeast of town. The proposed developments include an agritourism hub RV resort with a complementary mix of commercial and agricultural businesses and institutional uses. The interim regional evaluation framework application was made to the Calgary Metropolitan Region Board on February 18th. CMRB administration recommended approval for the application on May 17th, and as of March 31st, Strathmore is no longer a member of the CMRB. Therefore, we no longer have to seek board approval prior to third reading for any of our statutory documents. And such, staff is recommending that council grant third reading to bylaw number 2121, being the Legacy Farm Area Structure Plan. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Does anybody have any questions? All right, I'll entertain a motion, please. Oh, do you have a question?
No, I won't do a motion.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, please.
I move that council give third and final reading to bylaw number 21-21, being the Legacy Farms Area Structure Plan.
Great. Any, I'll call the question, I guess. All in favor? Thanks. And thank you very much, Ms. Williams.
Deputy Mayor, if I may, I had a comment before the vote. But
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay. It's a very short comment.
Yeah, please.
I just wanted to say thank you very much to you and your team for all the work that you've done on this. I'm very excited about the ASP. I think it's fantastic news, and thumbs up.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, and thank you very much for your comments. No, I'm sorry, I didn't see that, so yeah, thank you. All right, and we'll move on to the Regional Emergency Management Bylaw, my favorite bylaw. Chief?
Good evening, Deputy Mayor and councilors. So I'm here today. Obviously, we've brought this forward twice for your review. So today I'm hoping that we can give second and third reading to the bylaw 2205 for the Regional Emergency Management Bylaw, as well as adopt and sign the Regional Emergency Management Agreement between the Town of Strathmore, Wheatland County, Village of Hussar, Rockyford, and Standard. And we added two more things as a point of business within that bylaw, is to appoint myself as the DEM, Director of Emergency Management, and Baz Al as the Deputy DEM.
Great, thank you very much. Does anybody have any questions for Chief?
Yeah, I just have one. Again, I was looking through this and I noticed in your regional partnership, you had mentioned in that $20,000 that was allotted, there was a section under there under training. That's strictly for the emergency, like the regional plan. It doesn't take away from training of your members.
Yeah, that's correct. So this is strictly for what we're doing jointly. So it'd be our joint training needs. So whatever we need to do together will come out of that budget. We still have a separate budget that we would use in emergency management for the training of our town staff. And then we also have our fire training budget, which is completely separate from
Okay,
this
and
whole entire thing.
that's just where I wanted clarification. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you very much. Go ahead.
Deputy Mayor, I'd like to move that council give second reading to bylaw number 22-05, being the Regional Emergency Management Bylaw.
Thank you. Is there any debate or questions about that motion? Seeing none, all in favor? Thank you. And third, please.
I would move that council give third and final reading to bylaw number 22-05, being the Regional Emergency Management Bylaw.
All right, you've all heard that motion. All in favor? Thank you. And go ahead.
I move that council adopt and sign the Regional Emergency Management Agreement between the Town of Strathmore, Wheatland County, and the villages of Hussar, Rockyford, and Standard.
Thank you very much. Is there any questions or comments about that motion? Seeing none, all in favor? Thank you. And go ahead, Councillor.
I'd like to move that council appoint this handsome gentleman here, David Sturgeon, as the Director of Emergency Management for the Town of Strathmore.
Thank you for specifying which handsome gentleman. Is there any questions or comments about that motion? Okay, all in favor? All right. And go ahead.
I would also like to move that council appoint the equally as handsome Baz Al as the Deputy Director of Emergency Management for the Town of Strathmore.
Yes, well put. Is there any questions or debate about that motion? All right, all in favor? Thank you. And thank you very much, Chief. And thank you very much for your work on this as well. I know it. You've taken our advice or our questions and comments, so thank you. All right, and we'll move on to, I'm trying to close the meeting before the mayor gets back, actually. Yeah, I guess so. We'll go to 10.1, which is the WHMB board meeting minutes for March 10th. Is there anything you guys wanted to say about that?
I think it's pretty much, to me, I think it's pretty much self-explanatory. If there's any questions, Denise or I can answer them.
One question I had is, so I understand that there's like a number of, let's say, houses within the community that are owned by Wheatland Housing. Is there like a long-term plan for those? And would you guys like to just quickly comment or briefly comment about what that is?
So every month we have an update on the, so Wheatland Housing does social housing plus the lodge. And so there's a long history that I don't need to go into tonight about how the evolution of social housing came to be and how it came to be under the current structure. So today, Wheatland Housing owns a number of properties, and they manage them on behalf of the province under a social housing agreement. And so those houses have ongoing reports. There is a committee that works with the social housing department to do inspections on a yearly basis, plus, so there is a professional component as well as a constituent component, if you like. And those spaces exist in Strathmore, Standard, Rockyford, Gleason, and Carsland. And so they provide low-cost housing. In addition to that question, in answer to your question, they do sell them when they hit a certain time. So for instance, we used to own several mobile homes in the community, and we disposed of those in the mid to late 90s, I think. And then we owned some other homes that were getting older and needed more repair than was reasonable to expect for the amount of rent that we were claiming. So those were also discontinued. So at one time we had phase 1, 2, 3, and 4, and that's how it was arranged. Today it's under a simple social housing construct. And to answer your question, there is a definitive plan. And there are some other components to social housing, but they don't relate to the buildings. Yeah, so I hope that answers. You think? Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, like I don't, like I saw it referenced in here, and I wasn't, I don't really know anything about it. So
and there are public reports. So any time those reports that are brought up from the social housing director, who in this community currently is Rita Beveridge, and those reports are public. They're public information, and so it speaks to every detail, like every upkeep, any damage that's done, upkeep that's given. How things are rolled out in terms of the budgeting process. In my term, in my 8.5 years on Wheatland Housing, they have stayed strictly within budget. There have been a few times where they've been under, and they've been allowed to keep the money because of the operations. Yep. So yeah, it's very, very well managed. Wheatland Housing, the social housing aspect, also does John Giffen Manor and Sunset Haven.
Oh, okay.
As well. I should have mentioned that. And the upgrades to those are extensive right now because they are just being, their fire suppression being put in.
Interesting. Thank you very much for that information. If there's no other questions, then we'll, I guess, just accept that. And I guess we'll go, should we have a recess before we go in camera? Since we're at the end of everything? Till the mayor.
I think we can continue,
Yeah?
Your Worship. Yeah,
Okay.
I don't see any, I think the mayor would be fine.
Okay, well, then I'll entertain a motion to go in camera.
Your Worship, I would like to move in camera at this time at 7:08 p.m. Under section 24(1)A. Is it, Kara? Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, so you've all heard that motion. All in favor?